Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make bunny slippers for a stuffed animal. These have been highly requested ever since my nightgown video came out a few weeks ago, so I just had to make them. Now let's get started! The first thing to do is of course cut out our patterns. I'm making these slippers using this white faux fur I have from another project, but I'm later going to cut the fur shorter. You can use any kind of fluffy or furry fabric, or even just some felt instead. Now I can grab the patterns I made, and I'll have these linked in the description box. And I'm only going to cut out this shoe-shaped piece out of the faux fur. When cutting faux fur, it's best to flip it over first. And now I'm just pinning my pattern to the back, and I'm making sure to orient the pattern in a way that the fur will be pointed down for the finished slipper. Now to cut this out, you'll want to slide your scissors under all that fur and only cut that thin material that the fur is connected to. It'll feel like you're barely cutting through anything, but that's normal. This way you're not cutting through all the fur and making a mess. After that, I need to flip this pattern over and cut out another piece. That way the pieces will be mirror images of each other. And this is only for one slipper, so for the second one you'll need 2 more pieces. I'm doing one slipper at a time though, so I'm moving on to the bottom of the slipper, which I'm cutting out of this thick dark gray felt I just happen to have. I like that it's pretty sturdy, but since you won't really see the bottom of the slipper, you can use any kind of fabric you want, or even more fur, but I went with felt since it's less messy. For each slipper, I will need one of these. Okay, now before I start sewing, I want to give this faux fur a little makeover, since these are supposed to look like bunnies and not snow yetis, so I decided to give the pieces a trim. I even added a little sky paper for easy cleanup. After cutting the bottom edge of this first piece, I realized I should probably practice before I accidentally give these final pieces a bad haircut, so I'm grabbing a scrap to test my technique on. I found that cutting straight across the fur is not the look, so I figured the best way to trim this is to make small cuts vertically all over the piece and do them as randomly as possible so there aren't any harsh lines. So as you can see, I'm cutting vertically against the direction of the fur, and I'm just doing this all over. And I went over all of it a few times to try to get the length even. After doing that to both, they looked like this. I thought I did a pretty good job, but now that I'm thinking about it, I should have just used an electric razor so it would have been more even. Too bad I always come up with good ideas while doing the voiceover. Now that these pieces are ready, the next thing I'm going to do is a little zigzag stitch along the edge of this curved part, and this is to hopefully prevent a lot of fur from pulling off this edge since I'm not going to hem it. I'm pretty sure I used a stitch length and zigzag width of 2. After that, you can barely see those stitches, but here's what mine looked like. Next, I'm flipping these pieces good side to good side and pinning them together along this straight edge, and I'm going to use a straight stitch to sew them together. Now I'm not sure why I didn't just do this in the same step, but next I'm sewing the curved edges together, still good side to good side. Now after that, I can grab my piece for the sole, and then take my slipper piece with the bad side facing out still, and line up the bottom edge with the outer edge of the sole. You'll also want the sole good side facing up, but with this felt it doesn't really matter. Now I'm just pinning together those edges, trying to make sure the front of the slipper and front of the sole are pretty lined up. Once you get to the back, you might realize there's some extra slipper material, so you can tighten that by doing another straight stitch along the back to get it to the right size. Once it's all pinned, I'm using a straight stitch to connect these pieces, and I'd recommend starting in the back on one side of the seam so you eventually end up on the other side, because it can get pretty hard to sew over that end seam, especially if it's really thick like mine. After that, it should look like this. One thing to notice is that the slipper part kind of tends to pull in when sewing, which creates more extra material in the back, so as you're sewing this, just make sure to really match up the edges so this doesn't happen as much. Because of this, I had a lot more extra in the back, so I'm trimming that, but then I can finally turn this inside out. Now you have a basic fuzzy white slipper, but I'm making these bunnies, so I'm going to cut out some ears. I'll also link these patterns below, but it would also be really fun if you cut out different ears and made completely different animals. I'm folding my felt in half first so I can cut out 2 ears at once, and I'm also cutting out the inner parts of the ears with pink felt. Luckily, these are small ears because I don't have much felt in these colors. Before putting these together, I remembered that I meant to do the face first, since that might help me decide where to put the ears, so I'm first going to add the nose. I'm going to embroider the nose, so I've threaded a big needle with pink embroidery floss and tied a knot on the end. Then, entering through the inside, I'm poking my needle through slightly to the left of the seam, then inserting my needle slightly below that, but right in the middle of the seam so the nose will become a triangle. Then I'm going to keep on doing that, just adding stitches right next to the previous one, but I'm making sure to always have the bottom of the stitches joined in the center. I don't know if the way I'm explaining this is making sense, but you can see I'm just making an upside down triangle out of a bunch of lines. At the end, I also did one horizontal stitch over the top of the nose just to even everything out. An easier way to make this nose, which I thought of halfway through doing this, is to just sew or glue on a little piece of pink felt to be the nose. After that, I'm tying it off in the back, and now I can move on to the eyes. This is probably not the most common way of making eyes, but I just came up with it and it worked, so I'll show you how I did it. I first took a little piece of black yarn and tied it twice to make a double knot. Then, since I wasn't able to thread the yarn through any needles, I just decided to cut the ends off the knot so I have my little eye free. You'll want to cut as close to the knot as possible, and as long as you tie the knots pretty tight, they shouldn't unravel when you cut it off. Now I'm using a needle and black thread to sew the eye on. This method only works if you want a small eye like me though, because the more knots you add, they'll just kind of start stacking on each other and not make a big round knot. I first placed the eye where I wanted it, then inserted my needle as close to that place as possible through the back, then tried poking the needle through the knot. The knot is pretty tough to get through though, so I ended up going through the outer edge. Then I can insert my needle through the other side of the knot, and that should attach the eye. I made one more stitch going in the opposite direction, so the stitches kind of formed an X, which you won't be able to see. That way the eye doesn't get loose. Then I can tie the thread off in the back. Now I need to do that one more time for the other eye. You could probably use black felt for this as well, that way you could get any size eye you want. After that, the face is done and it's looking really cute. So we can finally get back to adding the ears, which is the final step, but first I need to connect the pink and white part of the ear together. You can use glue for this, but I'm just going to use a few stitches to connect them, starting at the top of the pink part. I don't have any light pink threads, so I'm just making very short stitches from the front and long stitches in the back so they aren't too noticeable on the pink felt. It probably would have been best to go around the entire pink part, but I just went straight down the middle, which works too. Once I get down to the bottom, I'm folding the white part in half and doing a few stitches back and forth so the bottom really stays together. Then, without cutting the thread, I'm inserting the needle into the slipper where I want the ear to be, which for me is pretty high up and towards the middle. Then I can go back through the bottom of the ear a few times until it's secure and tie it off inside the slipper. Of course, I need to do the same thing for the other ear. And after that, this bunny slipper is done! Let's cut to after I made the second one, and here they are together. I'm pretty impressed with myself that they ended up looking like twins. I think they actually look really realistic, not as in an actual bunny, but like they could be stuffed animals themselves, aside from the kind of jagged haircut. But now I can finally try these on my stuffed animal. I'm having a bunny wear them because why not? And she already has her nightgown on from a previous video, so she either just woke up and is ready for breakfast or is about to start her night routine. I feel like I usually only wear fuzzy slippers in the morning, but maybe that's just me. I really hope you enjoyed this video and try this out. If you have any photos you want to share or just want to talk, you can DM me on my Instagram, which is @LixiePig. Please give this video a like, comment any video requests you have, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!